Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
And it's not confined, unfortunately, to NASA.
Okay, so when you talk about the Nazis running the space program, you're talking about back then, after World War II, you got the V-2 rocket, from what I understand. So that's a group, right? Mm-hmm. And you've got the atomic bomb that they're creating, or they're taking the technology out of Germany and...
Well, we have been living under the historical record that the United States, through the Manhattan Project, overwhelming crash program, developed the atomic bomb. And that Japan and Germany are two major antagonists in World War II, although they had little small efforts. They were going down the wrong path, they didn't have enough money, they didn't have the right guys. It basically was no competition to the big United States, which put all this money, $2 billion in 1940s money, which now would translate to maybe $2 trillion of 21st century money. And we created the atomic bomb and used it twice in anger against Japan to end the war. According to Farrell, that may not be exactly what happened. There appears to be, from the documents, a much more sophisticated, much more advanced, maybe even functional atomic research program in Germany, which at least created and detonated one atomic weapon in test. And in his books he cites where and when and who was involved and all that. And yes, it looks like that knowledge was brought over after the war. It didn't help us during the war, but it was brought over and amalgamated. And in part, we actually may have taken some of the uranium to be used in one of the atomic bombs from German sources. There's a story about a U-boat that was bringing, enriched uranium, and we got to it, and it was headed originally for Japan. And I mean, this is an extraordinarily new, interesting insight into how World War II was produced and progressed and prosecuted. And it may not be, ultimately, when the end of the day arrives, it may not be that the history that we've been reading for the last 50 years is the actual history that everybody really lived.
Okay, but you have a group that's also dealing with free energy or these craft that the Nazis were also developing.
Maybe.
So in addition
maybe.
to the...
You always have to caution this with maybe.
Okay.
There are people who say yes, there are people who say no. It really ultimately, science depends on the experiments and the documents. Farrell has unearthed some documents, but even those documents, when it comes to the actual technologies that they were involved in, these really cutting-edge technologies, are very ambiguous. They can be interpreted in several ways. Now, I think in part it's because the good stuff has not been released yet, or it hasn't even been found yet.
Right.
There are mysterious deaths associated with some of this documentation. For instance, toward the end of the war, Patton died suddenly and mysteriously. Apparently he was heading a group, I think the 6th Army, that was actually headed for the border between Czechoslovakia and somewhere else to find in mines these buried documents from these secret black ops Nazi high-tech projects. So until you get the documentation, it's all rumor. And remember...
So is the idea maybe he found the documents and then was killed?
Or he didn't find them and he was killed because he was looking, he wasn't going to give up. We don't know.
And okay.
Yeah, and you have to go to Farrell's work to see that entire story.
Okay.
And here I am promoting another author's work, which I really want to do because Joseph Farrell is a stunningly important scholar who I have the pleasure of knowing, and as I said, we're going to be meeting here in a few
maybe we'll
weeks.
come back and do an interview with both of you.
That would be useful, I think.
Okay.
Very useful.
So, but what I'm wondering now is, so we've got these 3 groups. You've talked about the Nazis.
We only talk about 2 so
right,
far.
But that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
Is what I want to know.
We haven't really talked about the Masons yet.
Well, not a whole lot. No, not at all, really. So take us to the Masons and the magicians, and how do they work into NASA along with the Nazis?
Well, the Masons, of course, founded the United States.
Okay.
I mean, Masonic tradition of philosophy is a stunningly important adjunct to the advancement and evolution of the human species. To, the old Army phrase, be all that you can be. Masons are not bad guys. Masons are good guys.
Are we talking about Freemasons?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They are the heirs apparent of the Templars from the Middle Ages, who became very powerful by finding something in Jerusalem, under the Temple Mount. They became the most powerful organization in Europe. They literally, owned Europe, in essence. They created a free banking system. They created so many modern institutions that we would recognize, when you go to your ATM. And then Philip the Fair, the King of France, in 1307, on a Friday the 13th, lowered the boom and killed a lot of them, imprisoned most of them, chased some of them, and never found a lot of the important stuff that they were keeping secret, including an awful lot of money. An awful lot of money. And the rumors have been that the money was stashed up at a place called Oak Island, and that's why FDR and other Masons periodically have funded or gotten private funding to go and try to dig it up. And that's a whole other story for a whole other video.
Sure. What about the magicians?
The fact is that the Masons were the good guys. Now, when James Webb, who was Kennedy's administrator of NASA, handpicked, was a 33rd degree Mason. Okay. When you read Webb's biography, not his autobiography, which of course would have been written by him, but a biography written by somebody that was trying to figure out who James Webb really was, what Webb was doing, it's very clear in these pages, was trying to take the best of what NASA was created to do, which was to find out what's out there, to use it as a way to uplift the educational system, both at the high school level and the university level, to infuse cutting-edge new technologies in American industry, which of course create product, which of course elevate the entire economy of the entire middle class. You can look at his program, and it was a mandate to take everything NASA found that he could get his hands on and make it useful for the benefit of the American taxpayer. It's really all there. You just have to read it. What happened is because the two philosophies, the two metaphysical traditions between the Masons and the Nazis are so close. The Nazis were able to come in and take over the Masons, almost unknown, seamlessly, secretly, quietly, like a thief in the night, as the phrase goes. And I don't think the Masons ever realized until it was too late that they've been taken over. That the objectives that they were pursuing, which they also were keeping from the public by pronouncing, but they were trying to implement quietly. It's the secrecy that got them in trouble. Because if you try to do things secretly, in secrecy, terrible things can happen. Their biggest tactical mistake was not going public with what they found, instead of trying to implement it quietly, sub rosa, to gradually evolve this culture in a direction that it has to go, where aliens is not a dirty word, where we can actually talk about ETs and our ancestry and all the stuff that's out there that they found and not freak people out.
Okay, who found? The Masons or the Nazis?
NASA. The program itself, the NASA program. Remember, you have a program, you have people in charge of it behind the scenes.
But what I wanted to know is, back with the Nazis in Germany, they had this technology that was incredible, and supposedly they might have been back engineering. They had the atomic bomb, you're saying?
No, I said possibly. It's all not known. It's possible.
Okay,
there's a huge difference between possible and real.
And we've got documents that lead in that direction.
They strongly intimate, but they don't prove.
Okay.
Not yet. They don't prove.
But it had to come from somewhere. It didn't come, basically the idea is that it was ET contact, there was a whole development of a psychic, remote viewing.
Whose idea?
Back in the Nazi era.
Yeah, but from whom?
Good question, I'm asking.
Well, I'm not a Nazi expert. I backed into this through the NASA doorway.
Yeah.
I'm trying to back engineer politically what got us in this mess.
Exactly.
And I'm looking, and we look in Dark Mission at these various paper trails, and they lead back to these shadowy groups, good guys and obviously bad guys.
Right.
But they believe the same thing.
Right.
But remember, there's the dark and the light. You can take the same knowledge, I can take nuclear energy and make a bomb, or I can make a reactor. One lights cities and gives people power and energy, and the other destroys them. So there's always this double-edged sword.